So it's been a long time since I actually rewatched this series, but season 3 is coming out eventually, although I've been hearing the season 3 will be coming out eventually for a long while now, like a year at this point. But Man in the High Castle is one of my actually I would say it's safe to say that it's my favorite American live action show. It's not I guess you can't say it's a TV show because it's on Amazon Prime, but whatever. In my opinion, like the only thing worth watching that's Amazon Prime exclusive. But I really like Man in the High Castle. And the reason behind this is, well, think of my favorite anime. My favorite show of all time is Code Geass. And the premise of that show is, in the year 2010, the Holy Britannian Empire, this imperialistic, pseudo-British state, invades Japan, and like the beginning episodes are dealing with life in Japan under Britannian occupation. Code Geass definitely, I think you definitely benefit from Code Geass if you're Japanese, where you get the sense of Japanese pride whenever, they're cheering Nippon Banzai and stuff like that. But, I know a lot of Americans like it, but I don't think they have the nationalistic connection, I guess. Man in the High Castle is sort of the American answer to Code Geass in that regard, where America is split in half. West Coast is under Japanese control, East Coast is under German control, and it just talks about sort of life in the occupied states. And I'm a big fan of invasion literature, I believe it's called, where one country takes over another. That's like one of my favorite genres. You can explore a lot of emotion in that genre, and a lot of philosophies and ideologies in that genre. And what I really like about that genre, especially when the genre is done right. Well, let's rewind to Code Geass. Code Geass is like any other mecha anime in how they present its characters. In mecha anime, you typically have a lot of characters with at least two countries at war with each other. Oftentimes there's more than just two countries, but you have all these factions, all these people. But the thing is, very rarely, even though one side might be the protagonist side, and one side might be the antagonist side, because someone lives in the country that's considered the antagonist country, just because of that, they're not considered evil. Like, what I see a lot in war stories is there's this one country. Well, in American war stories, there's country A and country B. And country A is good, country B is bad. Country A has all the good soldiers that are out there doing good things. Country B has all the bad soldiers who are like burning down villages and stuff like that. That's what I typically see in American war media. War is portrayed very differently, I'd say, in Japanese media. War really highlights that on both sides of war there are heroes and there are villains. You can have someone on the good guy, quote, good guy side who casually nukes an entire city. Or you could have a person on the bad guy side who might be like tough as nails type of person who's just, sort of jerkish, but like over time they learn to become nicer. Possibly through one of their colleagues who's a nice person, even though they're on the, quote, bad side, or really the antagonist country, typically the antagonist empire. So really, it's American war media, I tend to see, does a black versus white mentality, or philosophy, or morality, while Japanese war media does gray versus gray. There's good and bad on both sides. Another thing is how war is portrayed in general. In American media, I typically see war portrayed as some sort of necessary evil at the worst. At the best, war is portrayed sort of as this glorious fight. There's definitely a cause behind the fight, and everyone won't forget the cause. Japanese war media, the cause tends to be kind of, watered down. The cause doesn't take as much of a position in the story as it will in American war media. And in Japanese war media, it's about war is looked through very much an anti-war lens, War is seen as suffering, tragedy, and sure, there might be battles that they win, and it's a glorious win, I guess, but they're like all tired after it, and like, they've taken some losses. The war isn't seen as glorious. Japanese war media, I think, tends to be much more anti-war than American war stories tend to be. Now, why is this? I think the main reason how wars are portrayed in Japanese fiction and how wars are portrayed in American fiction, the main reason they are so different is because America and Japan had a very different experience of World War II. World War II is, of course, like the most... I was just about to try to introduce World War II. Like, for those of you who don't know, World War II is yada, yada, yada. I don't want to do that, Jesus Christ. I'm not going to insult your intelligence that much. But World War II, Japan being an Axis power and America being an Allied power, Japan being on the front lines and facing, the front line of the war, from Japan's perspective, at some points was as far out as India and Papua New Guinea, and then at some points as close to home as air raids on Tokyo, on the capital itself, the heart and soul of Japan. The war... They can get that angle of, the war is far away, we don't need to worry about it mentality, but they can also get the angle of, okay, the war is right at our doorstep now. They can... What they learn from World War II is you can fight a war, do the very best you can, and still lose. Also, they don't tend to villainize the people who lose the war, aka, typically in a story you want the good guys to win the war, because that's just how plots generally work. However, Japan understands that just because you lost a war doesn't mean you're a bad guy. Because when they think of Japanese soldiers from World War II, they think of their grandparents, they think of their great-grandparents, they think of the old man running the candy store on the next street over, who, is always cheerful and smiley, and sure, there might be some jerkish people. There is certainly a general anti-soldier sentiment in some parts of Japan, unlike... In American war media, it's definitely much more pro-soldiers. Japan is much more open to the idea of, quote, good guys being war criminals. So, they experience World War II very differently. They've become very jaded when it comes to war. The Japanese philosophy on war, from the beginning of time regarding Japanese history up till 1945, was roughly the same. War is the greatest thing you can amount to. You win glory through war. 1945, from that point onward, war becomes this shameful thing that you really don't want to deal with. A strong anti-war bias, I guess, in Japanese culture. In American culture, however, the most significant war, they won. And not only did they win, but most of the population of the country didn't see people blow up into pieces in front of them. Meanwhile, in Japan, say you're some sort of school teacher or a civilian, construction worker in Tokyo. Oh, here comes the air raid sirens. Oh, gotta go to the bunkers. Oh, your house is bombed now. And then for Americans, oh, we're at war. We're seeing all these propaganda videos saying, hey, we just took Normandy. Hey, we just pushed past... We just liberated freaking the Netherlands or whatever. We took Paris back. And so they're going to come out with a zeitgeist of war being sort of yeah, look how great we are. We just kicked Germany all the way across Western Europe. We just kicked Japan across the Pacific Ocean. We're the best. We can't lose. Well, again, Japan has this philosophy of, if you're going to start a war, even if it looks like you're going to win, be prepared to lose everything. And, Japan doesn't tend to villainize the other side, because the other side in World War II is now its strongest ally. They can't really set up this narrative that the Americans were these complete evil monsters that were committing war crimes across the Pacific, when you have American soldiers stationed in your backyard, and you're relying on that country for defense. Americans can, portray Germans as heartless monsters. They can portray the Japanese as heartless monsters because the war was elsewhere. You can sort of otherize the enemy. You can't really do that in Japan with their history and culture and the current state of the country. So that goes down to why I think Japanese and American media portray war very differently. Here's why I like Man in the High Castle. Man in the High Castle is an American production, but its philosophy on war is very much in vain to the Japanese philosophy on war and invasions and government and stuff like that. Sure, there are Nazis in Man in the High Castle, but that doesn't mean you absolutely hate every single Nazi character. John Smith is a very intricate character that has multiple levels to him. I think John Smith represents the worst Americans can be, but I also think he's sort of going to have some sort of redemption arc. The Japanese aren't all evil. In fact, I would say, like, the straight-up evil characters, like, no redeeming qualities whatsoever, full-on evil characters, there aren't many of them in Man in the High Castle. And you think, oh, it's about Americans living in occupied America, with Germany and Japan splitting it. The Jews are all dead. What do you mean there are hardly any evil characters? Well, there's Adolf Hitler. I guess that counts as an evil character. There's Heinrich Himmler, but Heinrich Himmler is a bit interesting because Heinrich Himmler, juxtaposed against the Chancellor who succeeds Hitler, it seems very calm and moderate. And I say calm and moderate, I guess the last thing we see of him is him giving a freaking Hitler-style speech to the Volkshalle. But it's just very interesting. And even the Chancellor that succeeds Hitler, whose name I can't remember to save my life, his evil isn't like, he doesn't walk in and say, yo, screw the Jews, am I right? Haha, master race. Like, no. When we're introduced to him, we're introduced to him as the father of this other, more complex, nuanced character. And, like, we want to like him. But then we see his descent slowly into madness, and we realize, like, oh god, this dude might be worse than Hitler. Like, no, I guess that's what it comes down to. No character is simple in Man in the High Castle. Every single character has nuance to them. And I think that's something that's lost in a lot of American war media, especially regarding World War II. The loss of nuance. It's so easy to completely villainize people. Make a generic German soldier in World War II just be casually killing prisoners, burning civilian towns, and just, going around like, haha, let's kill the Jews, guys. It's very easy to write that. But it's more, there's more payoff in writing nuanced characters on each side. Man in the High Castle isn't one-sided. My favorite character in the entire show is a dude named, is he a captain? I can't remember. It's been a while since I watched it, but his name's Kido. He's a Japanese, not just Japanese officer, a Kempeitai officer. And if you know your World War II history, the Kempeitai are like, they're freaking crazy. The Kempeitai gets pretty involved in stuff, let's put it like that. The Kempeitai, I guess it's their equivalent of like the German Gestapo or something like that. But he is so nuanced. I really like Kido. Also, Kido reminds me of one of my commanding officers when I was in ROTC, so there's that too. Another part of why I really like Man in the High Castle is I speak Japanese, and I speak English, and I have enough understanding of German that I don't really need the subtitles in whenever the Germans are speaking. So there's some sort of self-gratification when I watch it, like, oh, I'm watching this show with 3 languages being spoken regularly, but I don't really need the subtitles. And that just makes me feel good, like, yeah, look at me, I'm awesome. But that's just a little self-indulgement when I watch the series. Anything else? Military uniforms are on fleek. A lot of accurate... It's interesting because the concept of America being split in half, one half under Japanese control, one half under German control, wasn't going to happen in World War II. Even if Japan and Germany won, that wouldn't happen to America. There's a lot of ridiculousness levels for the concept, and that's just because it comes from... It wants to explore themes and not necessarily historical accuracy, and I'm fine with that. However, even though it throws away historical accuracy as to what Japan and Germany would have done if they won World War II, there is a lot of intricacies that are accurate. Like, the main concept is Japan and Germany completely dividing the world in half with there is nothing besides Germany and Japan. besides that, not likely happening. Not likely those two countries' goals. Everything else is very accurate. How each country views society. Although there is something about Japan gassing Jews in that show, and Japan wouldn't gas Jews unless it felt pressured by Germany to do. Well, I can see Japan bowing down to Germany. It's like, okay, if this is going to hurt our alliance, whatever. And that's the thing. The relationship between Germany and Japan and Man in the High Castle is easily the most interesting part about the series to me. The whole plot of the second season is... by the way, there are spoilers in here, so yada yada. But the whole point of the second season is Hitler gets assassinated, and Japan is framed for doing it. And so you have this weird build-up between Germany and Japan slowly preparing to go to war with each other. And Germany having nukes is like, alright, we're gonna nuke Japan. And like, it's just, you see this awesome war... Another thing that I like about invasion literature is there's always a war room scene where there's a bunch of generals in the head of state in this dark room with a map of the world with just arrows pointing to where bombs and military troops are going to be deployed across the entire world. I really like those scenes. But the relationship between Japan and Germany and how they would deal with each other in a post-war world when they both win, I think is a very accurate representation of how Germany and Japan would relate to each other. Japan would definitely be more submissive to Germany, but it wouldn't crack down entirely. And whenever things start to look bad, I think there would have been a war between the two countries had they won the war eventually. They are very much, especially after Hitler died. I think Hitler would have kept peace between Germany and Japan. Just because of how much respect he had for East Asia in general. But no other Nazi had held Japan in such high regards. So as soon as Hitler was gone, yeah, it would make sense that Germany and Japan would slowly be gearing up towards war. Let's see. Anything else I want to say about Man in the High Castle? I don't think so. I spoiled a few things here and there, but I would really recommend watching it. And it's on Amazon Prime. If you have the Amazon Prime subscription thing, comes free with Amazon Prime. So check that out if you're not a coward.